Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's Transformation Talk. I am thrilled to be talking today with Dyana Valentine.
I love that version. Let's keep that.
Dyana Valentine of DyanaValentine.com. She is one part oracle, one part outlaw, and totally devoted to bringing greatness into the world, hers and other people's. So thank you for being here today, Dyana.
It's my pleasure. I'm so excited to hang out with you.
It's always fun. Okay, so you actually wrote a story for the Picking Up the Pieces guide that I have on my website for download, but I'd love to hear you talk about it a little bit because I think it's such a big story, and it's also something that sometimes people get weird about what grief is and what can prompt grief. And
right,
it's like,
or what we're allowed to grieve.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I love this story because it changed the trajectory of your life and also because it had such huge emotional impact. So can you tell us a little bit about what happened?
Yeah, of course I can. So the short version is I got unexpectedly kicked out of college as a very high maintenance, very like high pressure cooker, A++++ student in a lot of ways. I mean, at least in my own idea of myself. And it was like 2 days before graduation, and I had taken a year-long elective class, which I had aced. I mean, it was just amazing. It was American Sign Language. Could you think of a language that was better for me? I mean, I loved it. I soaked it up. I volunteered extra hours. I just could not have loved that class more. And we had a final paper that was a 5-page paper after a year. And if you didn't pass the paper, you didn't pass the class. But I just didn't even think that was an option. And I didn't also know that the teacher had failed me on that paper. And therefore, I'd failed the class. And therefore, I wasn't eligible to graduate. And therefore, I was being expelled for academic reasons 2 days before graduation. And I only found out because I went to pick up my cap and gown. And I couldn't, and there wasn't one. I thought, oh, that's an administrative mistake. And as I kind of kept going the chain of command, I realized that this is what was happening. So it was kind of trippy, very traumatic. Like it was very much like a tectonic shift in identity. But also, I think looking at it now from where we are in this conversation, I think it was actually the grieving of my own understanding of reality. Like that I could control it and that it was made up of this, and it was my actions drove outcomes, and it was like this very rigid way of looking at the way the world worked and the way that I belonged to it. And I think that looking at it now, that's what was the cause of most of my pain after that, was like, how could that happen? You know, and I think that's a kind of common grief experience across stories. How could that happen? And so that was really heavy. And I smile about it now because I think like it really did take me like 20 years to get over it. I mean, I'm still kind of pissed, especially because I still don't have an explanation. I don't have anything that makes any kind of sense around it, logistically, right? But from a spiritual standpoint, like I lived through it, even though on paper, like getting kicked out of school, and then I went back and I finished and I got my degree and stuff, but like getting kicked out of school really isn't the worst thing that could happen. But for me at that time, that was the worst thing, except death of a really family member. It was kind of the worst thing that had happened.
Yeah. Well, and it just, knowing you and knowing how you live like so in integrity and so full bore in life, like you just go. I would imagine, thinking about it for myself, what a shift in sort of self-identity, like who am I versus who do these other people think I am? And yeah, that reality of...
I don't know, though, Alana. I think we have very romantic ideas of each other. And I'm not even going to pretend that was totally integrous at 20 years old.
Wow. Yeah.
I cheated on stuff. And getting kicked out of school, it was like, oh, finally I got caught.
Oh,
Now,
interesting.
my own manufacture of what I was getting caught for was totally, I kind of made a whole thing up about it. But I was like, this isn't right. Wait a second. Maybe like God saw all that fucked up shit, or all the things I think are fucked up, You go to a place of like, well, this must be justice for something. Like, I must deserve it. I mean, we do that for ourselves, we do that to ourselves. So I don't know that it was not total outrage. There was definitely a bit of like, wait a second, like, it was that thing that I did when I was 14 when I kind of stole a car but kind of got away with it. It's like I gave it back a few minutes later. But I'm just saying, like, I went through a like totally self-flagellating inventory of reasons why this could be happening to me, which I think also is a very common experience, with grief and with kind of how could the world be shaped this way. Now I have to go back and evaluate every other piece of it to see if I can put together another version of the world where this could happen.
Right.
So I just want to like, just a slight little pinprick on that, like, integrous, oh my God, so perfect in every way thing. It's like, not so true.
Right. Yes. Okay. Fair enough. I had an experience in theater school where I reminded a teacher of his old girlfriend or something. And so for a year, like a semester, he called me by the wrong name. He didn't see me. He gave me a really bad grade. And so that's a tiny little piece of what, like, I'm thinking of how I felt around that and just the grief of getting a C in that class or something,
Oh, God.
So funny. So we were just talking before the call, too, about how your perspective on this experience has changed even in the last 6 months, year.
Oh, yeah. I didn't used to tell the story because I wasn't all that proud of it, right? I mean, it was sort of like something that I sort of needed to talk about, but kind of couldn't talk about and was like really ashamed and like, how could this have happened to me? Like, how could this black mark happen? Whatever. And so I think I went through an arc of like living through it and then kind of maybe accepting some sympathy for it. But I couldn't really accept sympathy until I'd gotten my degree. And like, then I was mad about having to spend like, I don't know, something like $7,000 or $8,000 extra dollars to finish my degree, even when I felt like I'd finished my degree, right? So there was this whole thing, and then I could kind of take a little bit of like sympathy, maybe like a little bit of hug, but not too nice and not too long, not too much reward for fucking something up, And then I went through a period of being just super angry, like at the professor. Like it was all like pointed at the source that still, she's alive somewhere and won't respond to things and doesn't have to. And she's protected by an institution and the injustice and the blah, blah, blah. So I went through like a lot of layers of like how I was looking at the situation and then would kind of forget about it for long periods of time and then be reminded of it. Like if somebody said, how did you like college? And I was like, and then I didn't really want to tell the story, but it was kind of affected other choices, like college even. I mean, graduate school was I'd taken classes in between there, but like art classes or things I want to take, but not pursuing a degree, it came back up because I was like, who has control over whether I get this degree? Like I became very vigilant, Mm-hmm. Then, and then the real breakthrough happened when I worked with Brooks Palmer, who his site is called Clutter Busting. He's a friend of mine, and she recommended him, and he came to LA, and I hosted one of his workshops, and as part of the workshop, we went to my bedroom closet and like clutter busted my bedroom closet. Wow. And up in the back corner of my bedroom closet was the box that had my whole year of 98, 99, 100% homework, my video final of my American Sign Language exam, the paper with just an F on it with no markings, other markings, the letters from deans of almost all the colleges of the school promoting me because I'd been obviously very, I can't help myself. I've been super involved in school. All these accolades and all this proof in the appeal, right? So it was one box of all this stuff. And he said, "What's in the box?" And I was like, ugh. And it was just like the whole room, like all the people who were camped out in my bedroom watching this happen were like, "What is that story?" And I was like, "I got kicked out of school, and blah, blah, blah. This is the whole appeal." And it was really, and what year was that? And I was like, 1990, And he's like, "What year is it now?" I was like, 2010. And I was like, "Oh my God." And he said, "So this is in your bedroom. This is like in your place of repose. You've got this like box of memories that makes you look ill when you talk about it." And I was like, "I do feel ill." And he goes, "So what would happen if I just walk these down to the recycling bin? Or if you just walk them down to the recycling bin?" I'm like, I could, what? What kind of question is that? Is this what you do with your business? Like, I was immediately completely in another space, And then I said, "Well, I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I can, shouldn't I go back through it, get all the stuff, like pull out the letters that are nice letters, like could use them as recommended." He goes, "Come on. Like, you don't have enough recommendations on your website." Like, it was like this whole, like, there was no logic to it. And he said, and I remember the moment that he said, "What if I carry them down for you?" And I was like, oh my God. It was like one of the most intimate moments in my life. Someone was offering to carry my grief to the recycling bin and take it out of one of my most intimate spaces, out of my house, down the stairs into a bin where, like, that day a truck was going to come and I couldn't revisit the reality of it. I could only revisit the current meaning I was making out of it. And it was like, I don't even know how to describe it because it wasn't, I'm not going to say it was some joyous experience because it was kind of traumatizing. At the same time, it was like, I'm a grown-ass woman. This makes perfect sense on paper. There are 10 people in my bedroom watching this happen. And I could take this opportunity to just have a flapping cape of recovery behind me and say yes to this incredible offer of care and tenderness. So I said yes. And Brooks Palmer carried my box outside. I went with him downstairs. I opened the lid. He put the box in and he said, "How do you feel now?" And I was like, really fucking terrified. Like, I feel really scared. What do I do without this evidence? Who am I without the story? Even though the story can still live, but there's no proof now.
Right.
Because it was at the time before everything was digital. Like, there's no record of that except a transcript that says, academic dismissal. And, like, that's the only thing. So it's like, oh my God,
Mm-hmm.
Something happened in the changing of how I use the story. So now I use the story with my first year college students at Santa Monica College to say, like, when I have an Ask Me Almost Anything day, and they can pick when it happens. They can choose when it is. So some of them choose it early in the semester, and some of them choose it late. But that story is they always ask, "How did you do in college?" And I can say, very tongue-in-cheek, but I can say, "I got kicked out." And they're like, "Oh, what? Wait, what?" And then there's a catalyzing kind of moment around, like, the injustice of that, and that happens on the planet. And that my purpose, one of my deep purposes in teaching this class, is to avoid that ever happening. You are never going to wonder, ever. And there will never be a situation where I would subjectively just decide to fail somebody for some. I mean, I loved her. She was like one of my idols. So she obviously did not feel that way about me for some reason, and I never knew,
Mm-hmm.
And it informed also lots of relationships where people would just disappear, and I was like really re-traumatized for years, and then I suddenly started to like see the pattern, and I was like, wait. I might not ever know what's happening with someone, and they might disappear, and I get to choose how I feel about myself, but also I get to choose how I feel about them and the situation. And it once I got to some level of release around it, it changed all these things that I couldn't have ever imagined it changing, you know? So anyway, I'm rambling quite a bit, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. Well, I love this story because, you know, for many of us, when we get to college,
Sorry, I had like snot dripping.
Oh. I love you. Yeah, so for many of us when we get to college, that's really that. I mean, that's such a huge experience. That's our world, right? And you've said too that it changed the trajectory of where you were going, and though you may not be able to trace that to where you are today, it seems to me like there's got to be some way to figure out that path.
My friend Barry, who was my lover for a while, he said that, well, because I've had other experiences like this, and he calls them cosmic collar grabs. So like when the cosmos just goes, hey, I told you 3 times, now I'm going to stop you in your tracks.
Right.
I think that part of that experience, if I was making meaning of it now, was about slowing down my role of like, you know, undergrad, then you take your MCATs, and then you go to medical school. I mean, I was headed to medical school on a kind of breakneck speed, and because I had decided when I was 5 that I was going to be a psychiatrist, I said it out loud, so therefore I had to keep that commitment through my whole life. Even though I looked at my friends who were becoming doctors, and even my mentors who were doctors, and they weren't, generally speaking, they weren't a cheerful group. They weren't really like an adventurous group, and you had to yield to a bureaucratic system that was going to take over at least 12 years of your life. If not, because I was, of course, going to be a surgeon, because I had discovered this completely idiot savant talent of surgery. It's a whole other story, but I'm just saying, like, once, like, the universe says, oh my God, you have a singular talent that no one else has, like, don't you have to use that, right? But I didn't want to go to medical school, and I was really conflicted about it. And I think I thought that going faster would make it hurt less. Mm. And I think that the cosmos was like, hey, buddy, just, hey, excuse me. And I think it was being very polite for a while. And then it was like, no, we have to stop her. And I think that it had to stop me in a way that was so violent that I couldn't do anything. Like, I couldn't barrel through it, right. You know? So yay for no medical school, and yay for escape pods and cosmic collar grabs, because who would I be now? You know, I'm just thrilled that I didn't do that. I mean, I created a new set of hazing for myself. I think it's all really ended up in a very beautiful way. Like, I feel whole now in a way that maybe I would have gotten to, but I'm really glad I got to it in this way. Mm.
Yeah. Wow. And having been someone who's experienced you as a friend and as a coach and as a collaborator, I too am very glad that you ended up where you are.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a couple more minutes. I want to follow up. You have some other experiences I wanted to ask you about, but that was such a fun story. So I have 3 final questions.
Okay.
If you had a magic wand and could change anything about the world with one wave, what would you change?
I think I would have less I'm sorries. That would definitely be one of the highlights, because it's such a versatile wish, you know. I think I would go with that one.
I like that. And for anyone who hasn't seen Dyana's TEDx talk called I'm Not Sorry, we will link to it from the bio under this video. And what brings you the most joy right now in your life?
It brings me a lot of joy that I feel like I have this sense that the decisions I'm making are really helpful to other people. And by having them, my decisions be helpful to other people, it reinforces and emboldens my decisions, even about myself. So that is like a giant, awesome gift right now. Yeah, that's a big one. Big one. Right, that's like right now happening right this moment.
Wow, I love that.
Yeah, thanks for asking.
And finally, one last question. What is one fun, unique, interesting fact about you that makes you uniquely you?
I don't know. Let me think about that for a second, because I've been thinking about. Oh, I know. One really fun thing that makes me uniquely me is that I think I rode a horse before I could walk.
Wow.
I'm 99% sure. I'll have my mom validate that in your comments or something, but I'm pretty sure that that's true, or at least really close to the time. And I think that definitely shaped who I am.
Do you still ride often?
Not often, but in my mind, I often dream ride. I dream ride a lot, and I rode, into my 20s, well into my 20s.
Were you dressage or Western or?
I think it started out Westerny, and then I was hunter jumper, and then did some dressage stuff. I think if I'd had my druthers and ended up like living somewhere, where that could happen, it probably would have been more like a kind of centered riding combined training thing, because that's really where my heart was headed with it, for sure.
Cool. I didn't know that about you.
See, you learn something new every day.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so, so much, Dyana, for sharing your story and your perspective on it now, and for doing the work that you do in the world.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, and thank you for doing this work. The world really needs it.
Thank you. Mwah.